Alrighty, I'm gonna give just another minute to see if we have anyone pop on. Perfect. Alrighty, so we will go ahead and get started. You should be able to see my screen. I'm also going to go ahead and start our auto captioner so that's ready for us. Okay, so welcome to How to House Your Data, a data analysis workshop. My name is Julia Crocco, and I'm excited to present for you all today. I'm going to keep this tab a little funky so that we can still see the captioner. But if this gets in our way, please feel free to let me know. Okay, before we begin, go ahead and pull up any program evaluation data that you have. If you don't have any, that's okay too. Really what we're looking for is any way that you are collecting information on what student staff or what professional staff members are doing. That'll be a great tool. If this isn't something that you have right now, but you may have it in the future, this is still going to be a great session. I'm actually going to walk you through how to do data analysis in both Excel and Power BI. So if you can do it with me step by step, great. And if it's something that you want to refer to a little bit later, the session is being recorded and will be available to you via YouTube. So just a little bit about me. My name is Julia Crocco. I use she, series pronouns. I am currently a graduate community director at the University of Arizona. This is my second year in this position and also my second year in the Masters of Development Practice program. My focus within development practice is in economics and econometrics, and so that's what has allowed me to explore all of these different data analysis tools that we'll be using today. So next, looking at our agenda. So first, we're going to talk about our learning outcomes for the session. I'll provide a bit of context as to where the U of A is currently at regarding data and data analysis. We'll talk through some Excel pivot tables, and then we'll move into Power BI dashboards, and then I will talk about some extensions to the work that we're talking about today. So really the goal of the session is to get you excited about data. Data can be a little bit scary if it isn't something that you use frequently. Also, we have a tendency to collect a lot of data and then not do anything with it. So hopefully after today's session, you'll be excited and invigorated to go back to some data sets that you may have access to and begin picking through them a little bit more and seeing what we can glean from them. So what are our learning outcomes? So after this session, professionals will be able to identify strengths and weaknesses based on program evaluation data, be a good consumer of assessment reports, and conduct data analysis in Excel and Power BI. So this is a great session if you're just starting out in your career like I am, to just dip your toes in the water of data analysis and see what you can find. So a little bit of context. I'm going to set the scene for you. So the University of Arizona implemented its residential curriculum in 2019. So still pretty new, and that's why this assessment is so important, because we're still making tweaks, and seeing what's coming out in our data allows us to do that. Our curriculum consists of 4 pillars: connection, responsibility, cultural understanding, and personal growth. This isn't super important to the session today, but what I will be doing in a lot of our graphics are filtering by these pillars. So if your campus doesn't have pillars per se, but you have another way that you're kind of sorting what programs and engagements are about, go ahead and just sub those in. The curriculum is implemented by both professional staff and student staff members that build engagements together. This varies a bit by building, but generally student staff members are given engagement plans by professional staff members that they can then implement either on their wing or in the building or even on a campus-wide level. Engagements are then tracked with an engagement tracker, which I'll use for my data set today. So I'm going to give you a couple of screenshots of what that looks like just to get a sense of what kind of data we're collecting. And the RAs are submitting these responses after they implement the programs or other engagements. So this is a sample of our engagement tracker, and it's just collecting general information about any type of engagement. It can be an active engagement like a program or a passive engagement like a bulletin board. We have a separate system that collects individual conversation information called a cat chat tracker, but we're not going to be working with that today. So that kind of engagement we're not going to be looking at. So here you can see the engagement strategy title. This is a really important one because it's a unique identifier for each program. So we're going to come back to that engagement strategy title multiple times throughout the session, but just kind of keep in your mind, especially if you're not already collecting data, there needs to be a way for you to uniquely identify each engagement that is happening throughout the year. Next, we're collecting some information about which hall is organizing and the organizers within the hall. We're then collecting information on the pillars. So what is our primary pillar? Which learning outcome is it connected to? We also do the same with secondary pillars. And then again, more general information. Who is the target audience? When is this program happening? Is it a physical engagement or a community engagement? How many people are attending and what's the approximate cost? So again, you'll see how each of these different pieces of information can be used throughout our analysis today. So we're going to go ahead and start with Excel. So if you have some program evaluation data that you'd like to use, go ahead and pull that up. Again, it can be an XLSX file or a CSV file. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the data that I will be working with today. So as you can see, this is a clean set of data. Nothing funky has been done to it yet. And this is a set of data just from my staff from this semester. So it's not too large, but it'll give us a good sense of what we're trying to accomplish. Another good thing to say while we're here is that this type of data analysis can be done at multiple levels. So today I'm going to show you at a building level as well as at a campus-wide level. And know that depending on the question that you're asking of the data, the level of analysis may differ a little bit. So we're going to try to answer some questions both as a building and as a campus. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of the data that we have here using Control Shift and then our arrow keys over to the right and down. And this is highlighting all of the cells that I have on this sheet. So I'm going to format this as a table. What formatting it as a table does is allows Excel to read the type of information that it is. So it knows what the label is and how many categories. This also is really important for Power BI. And so I'm going to go ahead and save this while I'm at it, just so that we have a nice clean data set to work with later on. I will continue to refer to the word clean when I talk about data, and we'll talk about this more at the very end. But as you begin to go through your data, you may see some discrepancies. So occasionally, if you filter by, so these are primary pillars, maybe you have 2 different responsibility categories. It just means that in these cells, it doesn't look exactly the same. And so that would be an entirely different presentation, but I will add my contact information at the end. So if you're having some issues with some unclean data, feel free to reach out if that's not something you're familiar with, and we can kind of work through some of it, because cleaning data is really fun. All right, so we're going to now go to Insert, Tables, and then Pivot Table. It's going to call it table 1, which is fine, and put it on a new worksheet. I always put my pivot tables on a new worksheet just because it helps me kind of separate all of the different things that we're working on. And this is what'll pop up. If you've used pivot tables before, this will look really familiar. If you haven't, that's okay too. And we're actually going to build out 2 different pivot tables today. So we're going to start by looking at how we're engaging with the different pillars. So first, I'm going to find our primary pillar category. So again, anything that's separating the type of engagement, what we're talking about, the content of what we're engaging with, we're going to go ahead and put that in the row category. And this will begin to populate. Don't worry that this doesn't look like something that's super readable yet, because we'll get there. Not a problem. And then in our column, we're going to have type of strategy. So this is helping us determine whether it was a community engagement or a physical engagement. And then, like I talked about earlier, we are going to use engagement strategy title as our value. So again, this is a unique identifier. And what this allows Excel to do, as you can see here, is count the number of programs that are in these separate buckets. So I'm going to make this a little bit shorter just so we can see a few more things. Great. So this is our first pivot table, which is great and grand and super exciting. One other thing that I'm going to do here is go ahead and put some conditional formatting in. What I find when I first look at a data set is that the white and the blue can be a little bit intimidating, and it's harder to see right off the bat what our trends are. And so if we use this conditional formatting tool, color scales, and I like to use the greens because they're kind of relaxing. And here we can really quickly see these insights. So we have a lot of connection programs going on so far this year in my building, which makes sense for at the beginning of the year. We want to foster those connections between our staff and our residents in campus in Tucson. And so that makes sense. What we aren't seeing so far are community engagements around personal growth. So this is something that I could take back to the staff and say, you know what? This month, let's put on another personal growth program. And if it's something that you can incorporate into your wings, let's go ahead and do that. And also bring about a conversation of what is a personal growth program, bring up those different learning outcomes again, and really try to hone in on that for the rest of the semester, even when we come back in January. So with our first pivot table done, we will go ahead and create one more. So again, same process. We want to be clicked in on this raw data sheet into the table somewhere. Insert pivot table. You'll see that that recommended pivot table is there. You can always use that. It's a really great tool. It depends on the data set how useful it is. So I tried it on this data set, and because of the UID number that was at the front, I wanted to pull that as some information, and that just wasn't super useful to us today, but go ahead and try it. And something that we will, again, refer back to is that this is definitely a process where you want to try things, try them again. Even when I go through and make tables, sometimes they don't look quite what I anticipate them looking like. And so sometimes it's just a matter of playing around a little bit. So we're actually going to add a filter in this next pivot table, which will be very exciting. This time I'm interested in what my individual RAs are doing. So I'm going to put them as the row, these organizers. So you can see the names populate in that A column. And then for columns, we're going to put the primary pillar. So again, we can see that these are beginning to populate. And then for values, engagement strategy title, again, that unique identifier. And then we'll actually filter it this time by type of strategy. So now we can see, I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. Perfect. So now we can see what types of programs and what content is being covered by each of our arrays. So kind of like we had talked about, that data cleaning is really important. So Abby also has their name in as Abigail in some of these. So that's something that I could go in and fix on the fly. You'll also see that our arrays sometimes program in groups. So that's the longer strings being captured there. Again, we can put in some conditional formatting just to see how each of our RAs are comparing in terms of what they're programming to. Perfect. So now we have a clearer picture of what's going on. What I like most about this type of data analysis is the collaboration that can come from it. So we see here that George has a really high number of personal growth engagements. And that's awesome because he's a member of our team that we can then share his knowledge with Abby or Naomi, who may not have completed a personal growth program yet. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can actually just share our resources and share our knowledge and share the passion that some RAs may have for certain types of engagements. So that is all of the pivot tables that we're going to build out. I'm going to show just a couple more that I was able to build. This is a different data set, but it's coming from that same tracker. So now we have data from all across campus, and this is from the 2020-2021 school year, so in the deep depths of COVID. That will also influence the types of engagements that we're seeing. So we see a lot more physical engagements than our community engagements. And so that'll be picked out in just a bit. But as you can see, just a much, much larger data set, which is kind of interesting to use. Again, thinking about the level of analysis, because this is a campus-wide level, it has a slightly different audience. So instead of sharing these insights with my staff and how we can better implement programs for the rest of the year, maybe this is a committee conversation. So I sit on the Wildcat Living Committee, and that's our curriculum. Maybe this is a conversation of, you know, we're really missing this pillar in this month. Let's create a engagement plan to fill in that gap. And we'll see some more of that insight in just a second. So this is one of the pivot tables that we just built out, that first one. So again, here we have the different pillars and by either community engagement or physical environment engagements. We see that we did a ton of responsibility physical environment engagements, which is really neat. So potentially some really great engagement plans that we can use again this year, and not a ton of cultural understanding community engagement. So maybe this is something that we go back to the training committee and talk about while we're in fall training next year. Can we incorporate some more ideas about how to engage our residents in cultural understanding in a more active way, either via program or virtual event? I am a previous business major, and so money is always at the top of my mind. So this is another pivot table I built out. This time we're filtering by only community engagements, so things that we would typically spend money on because our RAs don't typically spend money on their bulletin boards month to month. Shortening those up so you can see them all. So here we have each of our different pillars. We also have a social program category. This is for if RAs are doing a pop-in for popsicles type of event, they can categorize that here. Here we have the type of strategy count. So again, we see a lot of connection programs and a couple of responsibility and that lower number for our cultural understanding. Here's the sum of attendance. So this is how many students we reached in each pillar. So here we may be concerned that our cultural understanding is a bit lower, but we know that we're reaching students with a ton of engagements about connection, which is something that we can really highlight to the department of something that we're doing really, really well. This is the amount of money that we're spending on all of these programs put together. One that I'm typically interested in, are we spending a lot of money on our social programs? And if we are, can we also incorporate something from these pillars into those social programs so that we're really getting a lot of bang for our buck? And then here, these are just a couple of formulas that I added. So this money per program is dividing the cost by the count. So if this is the total amount of money, what's the average amount of money that we spent on this type of program? And then this is money per person. So this is dividing this sum of cost by the total count of attendance. So just different measures and different scales that we can look at how we're allocating our funds throughout the different pillars. Next, we have each of our buildings on campus by pillar. And so, again, as a way to foster some collaborations, we may see that Honors Village has a ton of responsibility programs, and so does La Paz. And so, maybe with some of our buildings like Hopi Graham Greenlee or La Aldea, we can encourage those staffs to collaborate to build programs together, or ask that La Paz and Graham Greenlee share some of those engagement plans so that we can implement them more across campus. Finally, this is including our audience information that we are capturing. So I wanted to show you a couple of different data points from that larger data set because we've primarily been working in just a couple. So here, instead of being the rows, we actually have those pillars as these columns. And then we have either the community engagement or physical engagement and at what scale. So again, with some conditional formatting, we're able to see that on our wings, we're seeing a lot of connection community engagements, and same with our physical environment spaces. And as I talked about earlier, we're not seeing very many things happening at a campus-wide level, which makes sense. COVID year changed the way we thought about programming, and so this may not have been a super accurate capture of what we were doing last year. So we are all through our Excel section. So next we're going to pop into Power BI. So Power BI is an online app that you can access through any Microsoft account that you may have. We have them through the university, so I'll be using my university account today. So to be able to log into that, you're going to go to app.powerbi.com and use those Microsoft credentials. So again, if you have any engagement tracking information and you want to walk through this next portion step by step with me, that would be great. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to go down to this bottom corner where it has this upward facing arrow. We're going to click on that. What we're on previously is this home screen, and what this means is get data. So it'll open this page here. We're going to go to Files, Local File, because the data set that we're using today I saved just on my desktop. And then we're going to use this one. So this is where we just built out our pivot table step by step for my building, our clean data with that table. So we're going to go ahead and open that up, and then we're going to import it versus upload it. And this is what allows us to create dashboards and reports, which is how we really dig into the visualization of this data. So it's going to give us a little pop-up when our dashboard's ready, but also I see that it populated down here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it. Those different color icons tell us what our output looks like. So some of them are just data files. This is called a dashboard, and then when you're finished with a dashboard, you can save it as a report, which is what we'll look at in just a second. So even more pop-ups this time, so even more to do than just with our pivot tables. I'm going to go ahead and close this filters. That's kind of our next step to analysis, so not something that we'll be using today. And we're going to go ahead and build out just a couple dashboards. So I'm going to start by adding an area chart. So once I click on that, it's going to go ahead and fill in some of this area. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it. And then because we saved our data as a table, we're able to open this raw data, and it's gone ahead and pulled all of those different column titles. So it's really easy to fill in these charts. So the first question that I'm interested in is that how many people are we reaching in each of our different pillars? So I'm going to look for our primary pillar. I'm going to put that as our axis. And then we're going to have values be our attendance count. And instead of counting, we're going to go ahead and sum. So it's adding the total number of students there. And then that's it for this one. So here we can go ahead and make it a bit bigger. Close this visualizations tab just for a second. So we can see that our connection, again, we're reaching a ton of students and maybe a little bit less on the responsibility side of things. So that's the insights that we can grab with this one. Next, we're going to make an area chart that's even a touch more in depth. So make sure that you click out of whatever you were editing before, otherwise it'll make edits to that current visual that you're clicked into. I'm going to click again in area chart. I'm going to drag this to be a little bit bigger. This time, what we're going to do on our axis is put the month of the program. So now we're interested in how we're engaging over the course of the year. There we go. Just didn't want to click in there. And then for the values, we're going to have that engagement strategy title, our unique identifier there. And then for the legend, we're going to do primary pillar. So we could already see with just the blue that we can show how many engagements we're doing over the course of the year, but this is even more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and close these fields so again we can get just a little bit of a bigger shot. So again, this is my building so far this semester. So what I can already see, September and August, we did a bunch of connection programs. And again, this makes sense. We're able to connect residents really early on to all of the fabulous things that exist for them here on campus. And then we can see that we have an uptick in October of responsibility and cultural understanding programs, which is great because that's what we had asked them to do on their wings. And then we're seeing a couple more in November. We may see that, in August, September, our numbers for personal growth are pretty low. And so maybe we make sure that we're incorporating that here later in the semester as students are beginning to wrap up toward finals and things of that nature. So we're going to go ahead and open this back up one more time and add one more thing to our dashboard. And this is called a slicer. So again, we want to make sure that we're not clicked into anything. And then in our slicer, opening up our raw data again, we're going to do it by organizer. So as we had seen earlier, this is how we determine who in the hall is doing these programs. And so now our data analysis has even another layer. Now we can start to look at accountability and how do we develop our individual RAs. So we're going to look at George. So George has done a pretty good job this semester. We had a personal growth program in August and a connection program, and now we're seeing a couple of personal growth programs that he's implementing here in November, which is really great. And then let's click into Cassie's. So Cassie's a new RA. Cassie's had a bit of a hard time understanding some of our administrative pieces that come with being an RA. So we can see that maybe Cassie is not implementing a ton of engagements on their hall, which is a conversation that we can have. Or maybe Cassie just doesn't know how to fill out the tracker. So it's another way of seeing, is our data collection going well, and be able to follow up with those RAs one-on-one. When you're ready to get rid of that slicer, you just click this little eraser button, and then it'll populate with all of our data once again. So first, dashboard complete, super exciting. We're going to build out one more and give a slightly different bit of information. So we're going to open up visualizations again and fields. This time, let's build a funnel. So that's this one. And the blue looks like a funnel. Make that a bit bigger. Now for group, we are going to have our organizers. This is like we had talked about a little bit earlier, this is a pretty small data set, so our funnel may look a little bit smaller, but we'll look at this again with the larger data set and build some of that out too. And now for our values, we're going to do the engagement strategy title. So now we can see the number of programs implemented by each RA. And then we're going to add another slicer. So again, clicking out of the funnel, clicking into our slicer, and then adding as our field our primary pillar or something that's capturing the content of our engagements. And so now make that touch smaller, close these so we can get a good look. Now we can see, okay, George has actually logged 8 engagements. Awesome. Daisy, 5. Here, again, some of our newer RAs may be forgetting to log their programs each time, so we can give some gentle reminders during the staff meeting. Now we can look, okay, if we're interested in cultural understanding, Tyler's doing a really great job. He has 2 programs done already in cultural understanding. And so maybe we can pull some engagement plans or find ways that he can share those engagements with some other RAs who haven't done a cultural understanding program yet. So that's it for building our dashboards. I'm going to go ahead and show you all the same dashboards, but this time with our full campus-wide data from last year. So just a few more data points so it can be a bit more interesting, a few more colors on there. So this is that first dashboard that we built out. Here, instead of having the individual RAs, we actually have buildings. So we can look at Arbol de la Vida from last year and see that we've connected a lot of students with responsibility, not a ton with social programs, and then cultural understanding is still something that we could do a bit better at. And then this is throughout the entire course of the year, how we had some peaks and valleys with different types of programs. So December, not a ton of programs, 1 personal growth, so maybe finding some more engagement plans that we, as a committee, a Wildcat Living curriculum committee, can build out in December. But a lot of responsibility happening in November as we gear up toward that finals time. Again, we can clear that slicer to see campus-wide what we have going on and begin to identify some trends. So really, everyone's talking about responsibility in November as we gear up toward finals, and then again in April toward the end of the final season. And then this is the same dashboard, but this time with the key influencers visual. So this isn't one that we built out today because the data set that I was using to build those out was just a bit too small. What we can see here is that it's analyzing for us how likely we are to be doing the different pillars. So this one's just looking at connection, and we'll change it in just a second. So if it's the month of August, we're more likely by quite a bit to be doing a connection program. And then we can see that Graham Greenlee is a great place for connection, as well as VDP here on campus. So if we're trying to foster that collaboration, leaning on these halls who have done a lot of these connection programs to build out some more engagement plans for the rest of campus. And then we can do the same thing with an item like personal growth, and it's going to run that same calculation. So now instead, we're seeing that September is a good month, and Arbol is doing a bunch of personal growth programs as well as Arizona Sonora. Now, looking at the pillar like we just built out, but instead of having, again, those organizers as the individual RAs, these are by building, and we can filter. So if we're worried about our cultural understanding programs, we want to lean on some buildings that have done a bunch of them and grab some engagement plans from them. We can see that Arbol and Honors Village and VDP have a lot of engagements already built out, so we can make sure that we're collecting those resources from them and sharing them with some buildings like Pima or Lichens that may have a few less. Finally, this is a tree map. So this is actually a quirk of our data set that I was able to build out this engagement. Data can come in different forms, and so this is like a long form data set, which means that there's lots of different columns for our learning outcomes. And so what this is depicting is using this slicer for each of our pillars, we're able to see how evenly we're distributing them across learning outcomes. So these are our cultural understanding learning outcomes. And when we're talking about cultural understanding programs, as I've selected in the slicer, we're doing a pretty good job. About each of the 4 learning outcomes are pretty evenly distributed. when we look at personal growth, maybe we could spend a bit more time on describing their personal identities and exploring their values, but we're doing a really great job at this ongoing self-reflection about their experiences. And then you can do the same thing with each of the pillars. So again, with responsibility, maybe spending a bit more time with this learning outcome, assessing the impact of their decisions on others, but we're doing a good job of practicing behaviors that positively impact their environment. So that's all I have to show you in Power BI today. Just to wrap up our conversation, now what? We talked about this throughout, and again, thinking about those different levels of analysis. Really, what this is helping us do is have a better understanding of the student experience overall. The whole implementation of the curriculum was to standardize this experience and make sure that we are providing a lot of value to students that come to live with us here on campus. And so by not only collecting this data, but also analyzing it and seeing these trends and being able to respond and change the way that we're engaging residents, we're filling in any gaps for ourselves where we may have just assumed what students were experiencing before. We are also able to identify engagement strengths and weaknesses on staff. So like I showed you, maybe it's just an administrative error. We don't know exactly what we're supposed to do after each engagement, or maybe some RAs are just struggling with a certain pillar. And so we can connect them with other RAs or even do something as a staff to build out some more engagements related to a specific topic. Reporting back to the larger department. So the data that I shared with you and the visualizations I shared with you about the entire campus, I actually also shared here at the U of A with our curriculum committee to begin talking about, okay, where are areas that we're doing really well? How many students did we engage with last year? Because that's just a really neat piece of information. And then finally, that encouraging collaboration, whether it's within staff or within a bigger campus, being able to share resources so that people are able to give students a pretty even experience across the board. How have I personally operationalized this data? So this is the time that I get to brag. My staff is awesome. And so we actually have an assessment committee on staff each year. So I've done this since being an RA, actually. And they are the ones that are taking this program data, creating these visuals, and then sharing back each month about the entire staff and once a semester to individual RAs about how they're doing on their wings. The best part about data is that you can use it. And so being able to show RAs that, you haven't actually hit this learning outcome. Let's make sure we do that on the hall, or as a building, we're missing in this area. We know that students are needing it. Let's make sure that we talk about it. Just two final thoughts. Hopefully they'll stick with you because they're kind of catchy. Something that is really popular in the world of data is garbage in, garbage out. Having clean data is so very important. Our form, we talked about this earlier, but for that count of attendance and then that monetary value of how much they spent on the program, it actually doesn't require RAs to put a number. And so a lot of RAs left us really neat little notes about how many people attended their programs, or maybe a little sad face if nobody attended, or a happy face if they got their whole haul. And so having to go in and clean up all of that just takes a little bit of time. So if you're able to take some time and intentionally think about the questions that you want to ask of the data set when you're building out some data collection measures, and make sure that you're doing these analyses so that now I was able to correct that in our form. So going forward, we won't have that same issue. And then Just Keep Swimming, from a great Disney film, especially when you're starting to work in different data analysis tools. There's going to be a lot of mistakes. I often put things in the wrong categories and just have to move them around a little bit. But if you just keep playing around, you'll end up seeing things that maybe you didn't even expect, and being able to kind of pull out some insights. So that is the end of my presentation today. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen in just a second to see if anyone had any questions in the chat, or anything that I can help you with while I'm still here. As promised, this is my contact information. I love data. I love working with data. If you have any questions at any point throughout the rest of the year or even moving forward, feel free to email me. I always find that just a buddy to chat through different data analysis problems can be really effective. And so I'm happy to do that for any of you. Thank you so much for watching. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. I would love to be connected. Have a nice day.